All right. Let's start with the Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the iron triple gem. Thus did he hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Valchan mountains in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration in the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon like this correctly and repeatedly, beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance, and so on up to including no aging and death, and no extension of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely and dwell in the perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscuration, without fear, having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Para Samgate Bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrate to the gathering of the kidneys of the three chakras to abandon the holy yoga of using space. By a powerful clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Para Samgate Bodhisoha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be dispelled, may they be pacified. Shintun Kori Soha. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of the 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here and right now. Sashi Puki Jushimeto Rahamri Rablingshi ni de gem padi sangye shindu mi te owa idoku namda Shin la chu pa sho idang guru ratna mandala kandiyataya
Sanji
Chonam
Chedam
tsoki
Soji
chonam
Chonam
la
La
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dani
Dami
kyam
Kyabsun
suchi
Dagi
dagi
Chushi
chiche gi
Gibi
betsona
Tsonam
gi
Gi
drola
Drola
penshi
Benche
sangye
Sanji
dro parasho
Droparasho Sanji
Chonam
Chedam Soji
tsoki
Chonam
chonam la
La
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dani
Dami
kyam
Kyabsun
suchi
Dagi
dagi
Chushi
chiche gi
Gibi
betsona
Tsonam Gi
drola
Drola
penshi
Benche
sangye
Sanji
dro parasho
Droparasho Sanji
Chonam
Chedam Soji
tsoki
Chonam
chonam la
La
chanchu
Chanchu
bardu
Bardu
dani
Dami
kyam
Kyabsun
suchi
Dagi
dagi
Chushi
chiche gi
Gibi
betsona
Tsonam Gi
drola
Drola
penshi
Sanji
sangye dro parasho
Droparasho Kangi Tuzi Nizone Tawa Tamche Pampi Chere Tampi Chun Denze Kodam Chela Changse Lo Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Geshe.
Good morning.
Dechin.
Dechen La Yesena. Seda the cousin on the Lugi Lulaya Chabadobi Chedo Tini Ani Lugi Mizami Cha the Mambushuk Song do Asta Dimanganzuta Jaloshu Ani Nembedo Testis Gap the Chin Junta Dini Tarare the cousin Nichitan Domgadi and the Pigi Lu Zobayimba Druya. Me di Marwas, Ra Gansu Drubjatsu di Anichi Pigitachi point and the Moin and the Lu Zoba Ganzula Yeshavi Lu Dichik and Zobe Sala Shatu Chibu di Ganzu Mi Chagamadas, di Mi Kora Dremadas. Me di and tell me being around to Juji and it's Chadamos did it and your drag chedu and Migulaya and Migni. So
we're going to pick up on the point that we left off yesterday. We had a lot of discussion about the uncleanliness of the body, how the body is filthy or dirty, and Shantideva made quite a few points with respect to that. So we're going to continue with that. In summary, when we look at what Shantideva is putting forward here with respect to the uncleanliness of the body, to prove that the body is not clean or it is dirty is not a final goal. This is not the final point that we want to establish or accomplish, that just the body is dirty and leave it like that. Whether you're a man or a woman, it's not enough just to establish that the body is unclean. Our objective is to reduce anger, attachment, and ignorance. And since this is our objective, to use such techniques in looking at the uncleanliness of the body in order to reduce anger, attachment, and ignorance, we have a discussion about such points.
Chok Tamjen is another Gukuni and it's Chagdan di Dichikpa and Meba Soya, Tashi Tangoya, Karis Laundi, and Chesa Nishabayana, Naranzu Division Tatuba, Tawa Tamji Kimbi, Kombotoyalaya, and Dig Partujus, T Nugdus, Ten Chambu Driali, T Nugdus, Nekab Naransolayata, Chik Tawajet and George Sami, Ludin Dian. Ludin di tolayachik, Ludin di da Sambushuchik, Karina Drutung, Ludin Caberchen Tian, and Chusus Tangadus. Tinza, 아니 착당승이디 인지민직다 빵고도스 디레도스로.
So we're looking at all ways, everything that can be done in order to reduce anger, attachment, and ignorance. A final goal, a final object of attainment are the states of liberation and the state of omniscience. And anger, attachment, and ignorance harm the attainment of liberation and omniscience. Not only that, we also said that we have a precious human body with the 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses, which means that we can do anything, whatever we set out to do, we can accomplish that because we have freedoms and richnesses. And yet, because of anger, attachment, and ignorance, our freedoms and richnesses are being wasted away. So what we need to do is to abandon, to destroy anger, attachment, and ignorance.
데르다 딘자 다 단주 추수스 간스탄도 세들이 단주 추수스 간스탄도 슬라운디 단다 다 쇼로가 제시하지바디 축기드나 메겐비 nenchon kanyi teten du 단주 분소 니간디 레기나와 남기 좀 세디 라.
So how are they wasted? In going back to the text and picking up from as we began yesterday with the point that says it is connected to the fault of numerous unwanted consequences. And verse 81 comes to the heading of it acts to hinder liberation and puts to waste the leisures and endowments. If you wonder, how does it put to waste the leisures and endowments? Well, verse 81 says, even oxen and the like can achieve this. Those who are pained by their actions destroy the perfect leisures and endowments so difficult to find for the sake of something of little benefit, which is not so rare.
데르다 가르스나 다 베나조 마리바리 아니 추미지 남도리 디왕기다 차 아니 차바기니 레온디 잠발라 다 직친 디잠기 아니 류론줄이야 아니 밍니 드레지 마토비기 아니 푸양 림불이야 아니 삼로탄 투메바 다 친디잠 대야세데 친디세데 조직비기 아니 직 론주 아니 직 카젤라소바 간지 아니 토포바 칸테다 직 되니 잠치트로 딘지 지기체도 아니 류덴 캬버젠데다 아니 추즈스 땅도스 다 딘지기 친디기 카제잠 되니 잠디 피기 링시 뜨무바 다 톤로생이디 톤로 힘바이네야 아니 제투고라스 로 소수 아니 토포바 칸다 데사지고 아니 tonro kashi pe ani mele laga bhege ani ji susu desa sotungi dindi yungu yorwasra o din rawaji gi baina ani nganzu ta dendri ten khabar ji le malengi khabas ki mando asta ro sinde cham gi chedta ani tangsha baina.
So mainly we waste our freedoms and richnesses because of ignorance, because of incorrect mental attention that is paid to certain objects, which then, and on that basis, attachment arises. So that arises, for example, with respect to things, to affairs of this life, our body, our wealth, and so forth. Our attachment observes or takes aims of this life, money, possessions, food, and so forth as its objective. And we not think of the long term, but rather than only what will occur to us or what we can get in this life. So when we look at things that we focus on in this life, for example, food, so far as at least having a plate or a bowl full of food or being busy with our dwellings and so forth. If we just focus just on these affairs, we're going to put to waste our freedoms and richnesses. And as Shantideva says, even animals can do that. Even animals can focus on make sure that they have enough food to eat and also have a good dwelling. Actually, some of them are doing even better than human beings in terms of being able to arrange or to build a place for dwelling. So if we become completely consumed with food, dwelling, and so forth, that would be a waste.
데레다 데베나로야 sen ditsam gi tendo dewa droba ta donga sewa mil tondu top chewa yobe chugi druna me gyumbi sen di dewa shindu non chongwa kain ba ti tendo danjur pusum choba ni na tencheje ni kawandi shinjulogi yula sibi legi narwa namji chomshin chunsembe nyemi teda samdi danjur gi tenla nyembo lembalan bebar chawos.
The commentary says, those tormented by the actions of craving for false objects, for the extremely insignificant happiness of this life, which is not rare and even an ox tries to achieve, exhaust and destroy the perfect freedoms and endowments found in this life, which are of great purpose and difficult to attain. Contemplating these faults, one should strive to take the essence of these spaces with freedoms and endowments.
Terda zo jida rotsen digi togu tamsum tamda kanshida ani ji seda nekan la sobi chedo bena ani chachiu bena budama to zokna bi ani jangzang ro jangz soyal soba ani mi sotugmo da sera mi jangz soyal ya drama sochi damang gogortan chi jangz sochu ani ditson chok ani that sagoras that digital that ro kanji tsin ditsam gita chik ani seg chedo ani chik tum du sheba na digital ro.
Looking at affairs that belong to this lifetime only, that we become so busy with, food and clothing and social interactions and so forth. There are some living beings that can also produce such things which do an excellent job in that sense, so birds or insects or what have you. Think about birds, for example, producing honey. We as human beings, we cannot produce honey. Bees can produce honey, and what we do is you can say that we deceive them, we excavate or we harvest the bees, the honey that bees produce.
Tere ngema nidong khazchile ya jana la ya olympic zemo keda chimu zeon di ta zetang di zamblin la ya keda yo zetang di chi chang la beden seros zetang chiu chang se kanji o dirida tinza ta kanji nganzu sen di zam ge chedo ani tang sha wa na ta dini ro res ro.
In 2008, the Olympics were held at Beijing in China, and the main stadium was called Bird's Nest, fashioned after a nest of a bird, right? Anyway, we put to waste our freedoms and richnesses when we focus solely on the affairs of this life.
Ta di mahimba ta ane nganzu luden dilaya kar drup tu gres teli khabar tu pawa Kardrup Tugres, Tanjuk Telaya, Yembolambalaya, Bevalaya, Kardrup Tugres Laundita, Tundruli Cabot the Pavadi, Nanzulaya, and Luti, Tachik, and Nanzutachik, terrible Geshe Chivana, Nanzulaya, Mixing Lebach Yoba Shegoras, Ra, or Dig Tolia, and a Kanji Namchurch to Edge. The Nanzula and Toma Yobadi, Namchurch to Edreshas, Ra, that Namchu Matuanchi. Ani chakbe on the sonchin, sen di zamgichik, and the longela chadevana, chotzao in the mandus, chotzao in the mandus.
So what can we accomplish? What can we do? We can extract the essence of this life. And the body that we have at the moment in this life makes it possible to do it. We can do it better than animals. So based on this body, or more specifically, based on the brain that we have as human beings, we can develop our wisdom, we can develop our intelligence. So we don't do that because of attachment. Because of attachment, we fail to use this opportunity to develop our wisdom. And this is utterly pointless.
Reda namchu singing the two ani dedin sam to yet ra ani dembat to yeti the chok to the meet and your service ra nanzun zambalin dinang lo in by ya me keta chi dozo ani dedeng chedo ani ranso le tanchin ta peyorosra nan zambalin dinang ta ji ta keta chimbole ya duksani keta chesa yore me pet ni saya mambu sedingi ya yaksani mi saya mambu chedo ani dedeng chedo ani rangi pegi ani lu lonja de cheba le tan rodengi pena ani gyagargi ne chi maha gendi chembo ra ani kharsa nansi mandala seda tanda anila ji issue anila mother tourist sendo and that dini Europe that mamu shujdo o du sama logi namju peju chechin dedin suche ani zambalingi mi degik ani devadu donga so ani demba shilajin so ding to da chami ene imisho deyach ro penatang anzu lo jata khashi nalogi medu zrendo ta lo ni dong abja chugje somwi pena daja chom den di yimba dedin rangchet dedin sujin sangi jaw dindi chados dinze digi leba di konzula yobi leba di nganzula yoba inza di chola matang chini ani demba di kari yimba di ani ten tuye chik chego dos ra nimbo lanya zo din sares.
So with our wisdom, with the intelligence that we seek to develop, we want to develop that so that we would be able to accomplish the happiness or the purpose, the welfare of sentient beings. And we can see in the world examples of those people that might have created a great damage to other people, other living beings, but just as well those that were able to do such a work or such a job of benefiting, accomplishing the welfare of so many living beings. So when we think of how they've acted based on understanding the truth, or understanding reality, developing the wish to be of benefit to others, people like, for example, the great Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and so forth, they developed an insight into reality, what is true, and through that they sought to benefit other sentient beings. And we find the life stories and examples inspiring. Similarly, Buddha Shakyamuni, that have lived 2,600 years ago, also developed the same intention to be of benefit to others, to contribute to the well-being of others. So those great people from the past have used their intelligence on the basis of their brain, and we have also a similar thing, our brain. So we don't want to put it to waste. We need to take the essence of this human body with freedoms and richnesses.
Dere daganji ani lo pigi chadangi ondu sonchini ani ta dyunla tembayina ani ta chi ma zodong zöbi ta ani digidresro ani mise tawjachia kanji ani sewa khonang la teni ani suzugi jakatogoya tindi chagodosro ta demba shila shachin chamba de sewa shila shachini ani dedun su ondi zambling la ya shiditya soso ina sanji kombo toya chik ro su khala ya sewachi mogowa o dindiji yungudo asni dinza nganzula digi ta chik shizat masona ani lebon luden dindiji yoba inza o di ani tisambi toni da chagdang nyemik samchini ani devi kompon taduba ani tawada tamji kimbi da kompon toya ya 전국도스 타와등이 로키국도스 들어 사실 시바디 딘디지레도 asra.
And when the mind is controlled by anger and attachment, the opposite can occur. So looking at people from the past, like Mao Zedong, that has created such a great damage to so many people. Being under the control of anger and attachment, one results to violence, only harming others. So then looking at our current situation, we have a good basis for developing loving concern to others, compassion to others, to the point where we can use that as a basis for attaining the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient, for the sake of others, for the sake of all sentient beings. So the base for that is our body. And this is the main point, that Shantideva emphasizes here in this section. Point D says developing the mind that strives for liberation by reflecting on its disadvantages.
There shiva nimik samni said Dagarare, the kanji, and a chagdangi nimik samni. And Tavatini Logibas. Debang even Jigushe, Yellow Sobo, Don Shepa, Chembo Meshe, Dugun, the Tubi Sejun Kaimba, Teyevi Chazam, the Tsigi Sanjin Yendruna, Deden Chanju Jobawi, Dongachela Chanju Mes.
So developing the mind that strives for liberation by reflecting on the disadvantages of anger and attachment. There are two verses in that section 82 and 83. Let's look at them. So it says, the objects of desire will certainly disintegrate, and then I shall fall into the hells and the like. The hardships of exhaustion arises for the sake of what is not very great. If Buddhahood itself is achieved with just 1/1,000,000th of that difficulty, the desirers have great suffering than practitioners of enlightenment, but there is no enlightenment.
Telda, Ani Chagbe on the Sony, Ani Chawalan Jubaina, Piggy Dachi, Dayan Tendinyachi, Yunguras, Dayan Piggy Dachi, and in Tartuba, Gasig Deva, Ra, Ani Odizurasta, Ra, Tutsu, and a Toba Inaya, Tutsula Mini, and a Tardokia, and Ransom Kia, Kanji, and in Deja Kia Jimado, Ani Shimbakia Marta, Diwangi, Ani T Namilaya, and Neval Soboton Chigrimado, and it Tanda Shemba Chembo Kayan Rumaris.
With attachment, for example, you may act upon it and seek to attain objects of desire. And at best, you could say that you could live your life like a prince, enjoying the happiness or bliss that comes from all those objects of desire, object of the senses. But at the end, the only thing that can rise from that is for your afflictive states of mind to increase, anger and attachment and jealousy and so forth. They only increase, and through the power of those afflictive states of mind, you following that fall to hellish states of existence. So there's nothing great in them.
These are and did some the Masebi be Dachi any Kawani Kawalaya, any Dungam Bashi Nyongoya, any Kajim Bashilia Negoya, or Dindi Chagdos, that Tele and Dintigi Tuyun Digi Chashi some chick Pa Gurni, and it Dedunlaya Shuni, Sangi Combodovana, Tuyun Digi Chashi some jiggy, be 아니 타두고 대와 산지 루투고 열다이네야 텔레야 마셔봐 아니 간지 아니 동할 아니 까와니 까와리야 간지 아니 동한 바실에 내야지 마도 타두킨 두야면도 아스 딘자 아니 디삼니 아니 로 텔레 다 아니 도고야디 베키션 보레샤스
From one end to the next, we find ourselves again with suffering, with miserable states of existence. If we invest only one part of what we do, when we end up in miserable states of existence over so many eons, if we invest just one part of that effort in seeking the happiness, for example, happiness that is entailed within the state of Buddhahood, we would be able to accomplish that. And yet, rather than investing at least one part of what we do in seeking that happiness, we invest our time in something that produces more suffering in the future, more miserable states in the future.
Then driven on Gasiki Devata Debayang, even Jibun Geshe. Tell a Chavinyavalo Sobo, Tomor Chebi, Tenchimu Membi Cher to Tomo Meban and Devalo Kobi, to be sick Chembon Joma, Kain but tea. Yevi chatsam gikaji gitsiki sangi nye dela dundrumna ngembala chabano tedar michedo deden deba tubi tendu nyomi dongar di chanjub dibi chobawi dongar chela debin debu chanjub kya medos
The commentary to these two verses say, in addition, the desired sensual happiness, such as that of a prince, is certain to disintegrate, and by being attached to it, one falls to lower realms such as the hells. One can easily attain enlightenment with just a 10 millionth of the difficulty and effort that one is subject to since beginningless time in attaining the always meaningless. Those attached to the vile do not act in such a manner. The suffering of the desirers, desiring to attain their wishes, exceeds the suffering of those engaged in the practices to attain enlightenment, and they also do not have the desired result of enlightenment.
레당아번 데발라 차바 니미 군진 종콘스 삼바 데연라 차바 데발라 차바 아 니스 데비 니미 삼바다 엠발라 가왈 컴보 담본 데비 니미 삼바네 냐소 동하 삼체는 데반 남라 찬다네 두다 메다 양사다 다는 기게 빼메페스
Now looking at the next section, point E is reflecting on how attachment to desires is the source of all disadvantages. Now, there are actually two main points in this section. The first one is considering or reflecting on the disadvantages of desire, and then the next one is developing the joy for isolation. So I think that cultivating joy for isolation actually fits within point, since it fits within point E. So let's look at, I'll say that later, let's look at verse 84. Having contemplated the sufferings of hell and the like, for the desirous one, weapons, poison, fire, ravines, and foes do not compare.
제다 되비기 남이 비다 녀월로 소비 동하르직 삼바이나 만준 직대 용다기 직 아니 다세야다 비다 직 천자 뒤수기 온기다 직 동하 용샤 드소 직 빼라 잡아나 자원이니 빼 아니 직 자사메바 직로 텔리펜 아니다 답빼 봄차 mam불에 아니 누가 여바직 어딘지 차고요레스.
Thinking of the ripening effects of desire, such as miserable states of existence, and comparing them to other things that inflict harm on us, like weapons and such. The ripening effect of desire are so much greater than the pain that we feel by weapons. Millions of times greater, million of times greater than what we experience through weapons and so forth.
데비는 데비던도 데버집인 데비냐와 소지 동ар 삼버치나 데반남나 니미 천단니 독다 메다 양사다 다남지 짠 데비 니시지 뱀메페비 데발라 차고 미차오스.
The commentary says, having contemplated the sufferings of the lower realms, such as the hells that arise from the negativity that one created for the purpose of desire, even examples such as weapons, poison, fire, high cliffs, and enemies cannot suffice as examples for the harm of desire, the desirous experience. Therefore, one should not be attached to sense objects.
데다 니바 엠발라 가와곰바. 나니 텐시니 당부 dortem바디 데더는 돌라 쥐치데 엠발라네 가와기스.
Now, looking at the next point in the outline, which is developing the joy of isolation, joy for isolation. So here in this outline, it seems that it is outside of point 3, but actually we should move point B to be under reflecting on how attachment to desire is the source of all disadvantages. So there are two sections included in that. One of them is the brief presentation in the first two lines of verse 85, and then the extensive explanation. Let's begin with the first two lines of verse 85, which reads, having in this way developed disillusion to objects of desire, I should generate joyful solitude.
Terda tedaren de la kyo chedes la ni kanji ani debi nyemi samchin debi nyemi ani samne ani deba chebala ya sem ting ni kyo chechini kanji ani chagdang inchi mayong sag ro chagdang mampal sage ani pigi ni tro tendri chilaya emba tendri chilaya ani pe ani 가서 때니 딱 가와곰기 여바치 가와기에 투바치 딘디 치고 그랬어.
So having looked at the disadvantages of desires, all the defects of desire and becoming disenchanted with desire, here Shantideva says that you seek a place of solitude from things that give rise to anger and attachment, and you take joy in that.
렌데는 할셔버 대들 데벌 교와 체데 엠발라는 가와게데 엠바 네 엠바 삼데 데벌 차오스.
The commentary says just like it has been said before, having developed disenchantment with desire, you seek solitude and develop joy in isolation, and in that way you practice absorption in seclusion.
terda niba geba shebal sum ta emba khandachik ro emba ne emba singindi ne emba khandajil tengo gres ani tenni ta pento kariyo sero yonde kariyo seti o dindisong dasra sum nela sobi punzoji khabardan rawan to bi yonden dan chokshi bi yonden nos tambu nela sobi punzoji khabarni ni embi ni chetawu neba chashinas zödan yumu ki tongba shivi nagi nantado genden dawu zendin kisewi yambi dolum kanzan yamgawa dame shivi nanglo yobayi jenlan pendo semshin chakbarchis.
So looking at an extensive explanation of cultivating joyful isolation, you might wonder, what are the good qualities of isolation? What's the benefit of seclusion? And these points are explained under three sections. The point on the excellence, such as that of place, the qualities of having obtained independence, and then the qualities of contentment. Let's look at the following 6 lines in Shantideva's text. Within pacified forests devoid of disputes and afflictions, the fortunate ones are joyful mansions of vast flat stone, cooled by the sandalwood moonlight and by the stirring peaceful forest breeze free from noise. Think of what is of benefit for others and stroll there. They dwell for as long as they wish in empty houses, at the foot of trees and in caves. Having abandoned the suffering of owning and guarding possessions, they are carefree without concern. So I read also through verse 87. I should have read only through this section. Within pacified forests devoid of dispute and afflictions, the fortunate ones, the joyful mansions of vast flat stones, cooled by the sandwood of moonlight and by steering peaceful blah blah, and stroll there. Sorry.
There's a that's the nimunki tongbas ra kanji kaso dachi chagdang pigi manper sagi ne ra 저도 니무지 동바세 조 차담 페르만페디 아니 직 삽쇼기 개바직 조 레모도 조 소소래야 소수 남주 아니 된 투버지 개바네 연나 소수 남주 된 투바이나 아니 가월 되나야 아직 차담 만페야기 탑시직 연구열었다 소수기 남주지 때마도나 아니 가월 로 되나야 아니 지 차단 유무디 기대야지 마도베기 지 아니 시신토로 용해디 가부쇼레도 왔으라.
So here in emphasizing the place, we still keep in mind that it's not just the place that is important in terms of creating such state of mind. If you develop your wisdom, if you have wisdom, if you have intelligence, wherever you are, anger and attachment will not arise. Whereas without wisdom or without intelligence, even if you remain in seclusion, your mind can still be governed by anger and attachment.
Redin David Lawson has said, Koloju Gabon Denda the Tashin, Devi Yondella, they were launched about that. She is about the Shengi Chadangi Genla Sobi, Nimugi Tongi, Namian Shivi, Nagi Nantado, Leberchibi, Kewo Kendenta, Davu Sewa, Zending Chuni, Sivi, Netar, Shindu Yambi, Dolo Kansantandrava, Nyamgawa, Yida, Mintibi, Dramiji, Jamshin Shivi, Nagi Long Yobaye. Zeberchibi nesu chanchuki sem gombala soba jenlan pembi ten samshi ani chabar chebi nenjuwa namgi emba temba ni jigdenbi dewa khani kya kyabar to pabos.
So the commentary to these two verses begin with a query. In what kind of isolated place should one remain? Just like the will-turning king who has no competition and enjoys the happiness of the senses, the yogi abides in the peaceful forest, free from the distractions of others' strife and the afflictions of attachment and anger by others. Like previous fortunate beings, practicing the good action in a cool place, refreshed by moonlight and anointed by sandal, on vast flat stones equaling wholesome abodes, joyful and without unpleasant sound to the mind, in a place beautified by the movement of a soft and peaceful forest breeze. There the yogi does contemplations for the purpose of others, such as meditating on the mind of enlightenment, and wanders around. Relying in such a way on solitude, the yogi's happiness is superior to any worldly happiness.
Tereda ji dendro rese da susu pigi susu la ral de le devaro zu negi keba mayimba susu la ral le devachik manzu du siyan yang de samdawn di ani susu la tuk devachik ro manzu tambon di choju di ni to chudu ne chubde ji la ya choju di shebe khadu la ya ngegi chik nen dindi ji la ya devayan da shu ya buchik doa samsam ro chik nge tudi lava la is ro nge manzu nen ditaw pe ne emban ditaw ji la ya an deji chona ya bu doa ro chik ina du spa chik ene nalo sun zung di zambala an negi kebar remandos nela ningi migi semgam di pigi susu gi sem di tagda chik juma du baina ani ne emba khandjile deba ina ya ani chagdan ki ya rensam ki ya ani chik dindi shu yung do asra pendo mo do asra ne pendo mo do as kanji susu gi namju ji tema du baina ani ne emba sedi Kaudron Raya Meisaris.
Mainly it depends upon you. It doesn't depend only on the place that you're going to dwell it. It mainly depends upon you. It mainly depends upon your wisdom. Geshe taught this text before around 2016 or 17, and at that point, he said that thinking of a place of solitude, well, this is Chenrezig Institute, or this place is a place of solitude. But then a few years have gone by, and Geshe is now more involved with the community, and now he looks at it slightly differently, in that you can remain in a place like that. It is a place of solitude, but if in your mind you cannot think right, if you haven't developed wisdom, then even in a place like that, you will still be subject to anger and attachment and jealousy and competitiveness and so forth. So without developing your wisdom, without developing your intelligence, you will never find the right place.
There's do shidi zambala nganzu phigile ya chi nyenshe che zamayimba ani di thun samgoya phigi chi samshung lo che mayimba ta gom gore sedi ro thesum gomsum che gore sedi ta nenga shuch ro thesum gomsum majina loi komdi ten tuwech ro ngangi komdi yongya di khaburendos ngangi komdi ji mathe bayina ani nganzu kom대 개와 통하면 단답도 kom대야 되고 차다 모성 인반자 아니 가드이나 로디 초 쇼드레지 라 아니 어디렌도스.
And therefore, it's not that we just listen to such teachings. We need to think about those teachings, and with the wisdom that arises from thinking through what we hear, we use that for our meditation. In that way, we integrate between study, reflection, and meditation, which are needed. They are needed because it's not that we're going to develop positive habits naturally on their own accord. After all, since time without beginning and up until now, we've been so accustomed to anger, attachment, and so forth that positive habits, a positive way of thinking are not going to occur naturally. We do need to invest in them.
그래도 인생 안주 빼나 다치 마트나 삼야스 기요 말was 삼야 메나 아니 고미야스 기요 말was 간지 아니 퇴지 삼피 시바치 시바디 아니 콤디텐 두 순로고야디 다 nenga 차도스 딘디지 차반다 아니 차당기 샤원도 만도 차당라 예믹되지니 디 도쇼라야 로 콤바지나니 다 라왕기 연den싱이티 로 니바 라왕기 라왕 투비 연den세디 디 용고도 왔어라.
So we therefore develop habits through a study, reflection, and meditation. And this is a main point. So without study, we will not be able to reflect. And without reflection, we will not have things to meditate on. So we need then to study, reflect, and meditate. Not to allow anger, attachment, and ignorance to control our mind, but to see faults in anger, attachment, and ignorance, and to practice what is opposite to anger, attachment, and ignorance, and through that to develop qualities of freedom.
데르다 라왕기 연된 토발야 아니 조디 아니 차당 고고로스 차당 고엘야 차당 계사기 율 비기지 대연로서 디디다 아니 예미슈 전부 삼고요 완자다 가지는 간다 아니 송대도 좀 디렌도스 다 딘디지 여바이나 아니 자베는 소만나지 강동 신종 부다도 강도 지신 되네시 용진 송이 동화방 떼바매바 방야주스 어딜레그리스.
So then the next point in verse 87 is the qualities of having obtained independence or freedom. So the qualities of having obtained freedom are attained also through contemplating the disadvantages of desire, as we extensively discussed in the last few sessions, right? So we need to think a lot about the disadvantages of desire in order to obtain the qualities of freedom. So verse 87 again reads, they dwell for as long as they wish in empty houses, at the foot of trees and in caves. Having abandoned the sufferings of owning and guarding possessions, they are carefree without concern.
제당안저 산지점된 데 최들이야 슈연자 산지점된 데 베게 Gabu Gasi the Jeva, Kanji, Yons Zoba, Le Tani, any chick piggy, that's Shingront, Ra, any chick Shinalia, any Shingilia, Gavnin, and the chick Loduka Chego, Chela Soba Didi, so any and Casa that chick Donlen Chesadi, Dayan La Chabi Chaba Delia, and Donlen Nandos, Ra.
The Buddha, the Bhagavan, having given up his life as a prince in a royal court, have practiced 6 years of ascetic practices at the foot of a tree. And of the main things that he did was to oppose the attachment that he had to objects of desire.
Dinan Somanajin, Biggie, Sukangia, Daduma Zombigi, any Shindon Jelea, Gavin Debaina, any Sukangi Osom Mugoya, and Kanlaya Piggy, any Chashin Gisameva, any Lamayon as Samson, Mission Shermayon as Samson, Tachi Namdon Dam de Kia, to Zutsama Ranshin Gadrech. To some Ranshin, Dusan Gown Zambalata, sometimes a chick model Legmaros, sometimes a chick did Tower Tamji Comadria, Kanji, and a Dembitan Kain, but the so Kanaya Red Dog Lochamogo, Dindichi Yabana, that she any Sam did make what Chichilea, and it did to your chick. Yonsaras, the Madame Anzula chick, and in Sonya da Piggy, and the Sonya da chick Tindigi. And reduces a mamushu, Giovanna, Sam Kaduna Dicholo, and Drochini, and Miguel said near something to said, Kabushu Redos.
And as this verse says, 87, if we dwell in places which are not owned by others, like for example, if you dwell at the foot of a tree that is not owned by others, you will have nothing that you need to protect, nothing that you need to attain, nothing that you will lose, no one that will defeat you. So in that sense, your mind will dwell in a state of joy, and the only concern that you have would be for attaining the state of liberation and enlightenment. Without hopes, without expectations that someone is going to reward you, protect you, and so forth, you're going to be solely invested in attaining the state of liberation and enlightenment. Otherwise, if we still dwell within that state of mind that is seeking obtainments and protections and so forth, our mind is going to be often thinking of these points, which will make it difficult to develop a single pointedness of mind.
Did it dang on the big on the Chagdan should change Shembu Shuch Yovainza, Nega, any Betty, and Sanjum den the Nanshinji Namatuba in a ya, and D Zeba Namter, Yani and the Samlotan, Telea Jesu and Kevana, and Pependo Yosaris, Pependo Yosaris.
So currently we have strong anger and attachment, and we cannot practice like the Buddha, the Bhagavan did. But still, if we at least rejoice in the deeds of the Buddha, the deeds that are told in his life stories, it's going to be beneficial.
Timadonga Sosu Matu di Zambala, that the young make raise some bed you shabana, Teni Kan young make you chagrazra. The Sosu Mayon Bainaya, Piggy Nangin Tilia. Jesuiran Chevaina, Gachagambatini, Tig, Semlea, Pasha Shuchembu, Shachini, and it gave a diligent Marebainaya, gave a chimanam to tende, and Pasha T Togi, young Koreva Chiachi, Yon Chogrovasra.
Whereas if your attitude with respect to the things that you cannot do at the moment, in thinking that it's not possible for me at all to do what the Buddha did, so therefore I need not to think about it, I can just chuck it out or set it aside, you get no benefit from that. So if you rejoice in the deeds of the Buddha, even things that you cannot do at the moment, you still place imprints upon your mind stream, and you will derive benefit from those imprints, if not in this life, definitely in future lifetimes.
다치 용야 메주지레 상바이나 베디 셈나는 직르 당샤로 가고라 연구도스 디 베드 노르고스레스 용야 다 수주기 체델야 직 용야기 비 제와 메나야 디기텔야 직 아니 이란 제고야 이메게고야 가와 공고야 네술디 백히쳔부도 통구도스로 백히쳔부 통구도스디.
So Geshe said, at least for him on a personal level, even with things that he thinks that it's not going to happen, it's not possible for me to do it, putting it aside and not doing anything with it is a mistake. So even if you have no hope to accomplish those things in this life, still it's important to be inspired by those things, to rejoice in them, to develop a sense of affinity or liking to those things, even if you cannot do them in this life.
데베나 끼오셰메비 칸동다 신동다 레푸타도 네네 칸도 지지 데데바 테시드 네션 요셰 마보용 수 점바타 대답 메년버 송이 동할 빵데 렌도 기때바 메바 바양 수제베 네버 차오스.
Looking at the commentary to verse 87. Abiding in houses abandoned by others, at the foot of trees and caves for as long as one wishes, abandoning the suffering of keeping and protecting many possessions. They abide carefree, independently from fears and worries.
데르다 딘디기 지 아니 파페부치 톨이야 네투야라야 조치 가린 네 연구할슬란디 촉시 생인디 연구레스로 촉시 매바이나 가리 여바이나야 아니 데바카야 매바치 만줄라야 롱주 가리 총바이나야 데바마카마치 베나 벤주도지나 가주 사바이나야 망르 고야지 마도비 다 딕송 삼성기 촉시 데메디 아니 가두이나 제외 강이야 아니 드로샤지 차고라스 진짜 촉시비 연된생인데다 개체슈 즉 송고도스.
In order to live at ease with a mind that is relaxed, we need to be content. We need contentment. Without contentment, there would be no satisfaction with respect to objects of desire. If we cannot reach that sense of contentment in which we stop thinking that I need more than I have now. If we don't think that it's enough, actually I have just enough, without that it'd be difficult to, first of all, find a sense of contentment, and therefore it would also be difficult to put a lot of effort into our practice.
자외나 라완주진 차멜라 칸다 양는 데메바 초시 대주 강인바 왕비장의 대녀가스.
So looking at the third point in the section, a section that gives an extensive explanation to cultivating a joy for isolation, the quality of contentment in verse 88, it reads, utilizing freely without attachment, having no ties with anyone. Even lords have difficulty finding that which is the enjoyment of happy contentment.
제다 베나 다 롱주 비기 다 롱주 라야 슈치 차송와이나 아니 롱주 드위야기 담 베준식으로 와서 롱주 드위야 베준치온디 베나다 지 미게지 바이나 아니 소소소 비기 깔레견 총자야라 소바다 다지 가리나 지 제도에 저라스 다 베나 라브도 총으로 보지마나 랍숑 지기 아니 지 롱주 된딩게 바이나 되네 베디 아니 라마치에 매교치 뇨그람 바시 차로야지 야제야다마 차고 와서 간스나 미신지기 다 라반니 랭 고교로 차고도 왔다로 다 총점은 저는 지금 말았어 아니 미자는 초는 지금 말고는 지금 말다 비기다 미 ngo송친 아니 쟁인지 총와는 다디 ngo송 거야 다 딘디 마무슈 질라온디 란싱 기페 아니 라마키니 매와치 chagro nyanga pioras ra tinni tili sosula khan yobadi gita ani chok sheba chichini ani de shabana yakshu di rama cheshu di tichago asares.
When we become attached to enjoyments, to different utilities, then we make effort in securing them. We work hard in order to securing them. So if you're a lay person, for example, you might work hard in order to do that. You might conduct a business, buy and sell and so forth. When you become a monastic, if you're still attached to resources, to utilities, to enjoyment, you find no freedom. You have only problems. If you as a monastic are still controlled by this attachment to resources, and on that account you will have to then still interact with others in order to get what you seek. In that sense, you'll still be held by others, and you'll still be in the grip of others. You'll have to treat others in a particular way. You might have to get involved with flattery, speaking nicely to others and thinking that they might give something to you and such. So if you live like that, if you live your life like that as a monastic, you have no freedom. Whereas if you can become content with whatever you have and think that that's enough, that's the best freedom that can be obtained. The greatest freedom that can be obtained.
Jadi ngarang le shigi yosira nangyamaina suzu geging tikle yore suzu lami tikle yore ani thuitawdo ta chi kasota geging tsani da labja raya yorwas ta du se ani mi lombala ya ani chi kukbe soroji lewondi ani kabkola ya chi ani kasota dindi yungu dos ta di machis keran deyung tolaya tsawni lo ani samlo madans ro keran khan raba digin driwachin ani drogordas so la ya labje gyayag zamla an legyoroj tungudos.
At least Geshe said that this is something that he thinks about in relation to himself. He kind of encourages himself in, first of all, recognizing that previously when he relied upon his teachers and also lived in close proximity to his teacher, his lamas, his teachers, and so forth, advice about the importance of developing contentment was given often. But then, having reached other places where sometimes it's easy for kind of this foolish way of thinking that seeks resources and enjoyments and so forth to arise, Geshe says that he has to advise himself again and again that developing a sense of contentment will give him the greatest freedom.
Direjda somba shinni chidar gombi tsulanis da dindige sem chagdangi on the doya dipa kani da sem chagdangi on the masomba zamgi penguyo marasra sem chagdangi on the masomba zang penguyo mari sem pigi migba te gosa jilaya teni nitu gogonza da shinni gomgore sayat da shinni chidar gomgore sayat and tsulanis ra.
And now we get to the second section of chapter number 8. So just to stop anger and attachment, as we've looked at in the previous section, is not enough. You might have stopped anger and attachment, but just doing that is not enough. Now, having done that, you need to attend your mind to a single point state. And this is the next section in chapter number 8. Let's look at the outline. It says, how to cultivate calm abiding.
Terda dison dige darjen nyambo gombi tsuldan darjen jibi tsuls tambo darjen nyambo gombi tsulani dordemba da geba sheba seti sajidi yung dosra.
Now, how to cultivate calm abiding comes under two sections. The first one is the way to meditate on the equality of self and others. And after that, we're going to look at the way to exchange self and others, right? So 2 points in the meditation on equalizing, exchanging self with others as part of how to cultivate calm abiding.
어디래서 딘자다 감들이 아니 신이 드비야기 신이 디기 아니 샘 아니 친구기 온도 들어왔다 신이 아니 내사기 미바디 따주 짜르트는 송고도 왔어 미바디 가르레스라 온다 다진 냠바티 랑다 신 냠바디 아니 감디기 신이 미발에 샤치니 아니 디 신이 드르브니 가지고 잔죽샘 곰고 그랬어. 잔죽샘 곰니 아니 상기 곰부 터버지고 그랬어. 단 너도 들어다.
In cultivating calm abiding, having pacified laxity and excitation as we practice the single pointedness of calm abiding, we here use a particular object for the cultivation of shamatha calm abiding. The object is first of all the quality of self and others. When we cultivate shamatha in observing the quality of self and others, we use that as a basis for developing bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And on that basis, the basis of bodhicitta, we seek to attain the state of enlightenment.
자외 나올라야 텔레소비 넘바이 MB 연데 삼체니 남도 니버시바다 잔주섬는 공버차스
So we'll begin with a brief presentation in two verses, 89 and 90. Let's look at verse 89. Having through such way as this thought about the excellence of isolation, I should completely pacify conceptualizations and meditate on bodhicitta.
데베 나마는 하르샤바 텔레소비 넘바이 둔진라 소비 MB 타이 니기 연된 삼바체니 데버 텐드 녀발라 소비 남도 녀버시바탄스 잔주샘는 공버차보 손사
Looking at the commentary, it says, having contemplated in the aspects outlined before and in other aspects, the qualities of remote places isolated from outer excitement and other distractions, one should then pacify the disturbing thoughts that are aspiring to sense and other objects and meditate on the mind of enlightenment.
데네 다당 셴드 냠바니 당보 닌드 베베데 곰스 데다 동한 냠베나 탐제 다진 송월샤스 다 다진 냠지 곰수기다 nenga 주 디 균진 주 디테니 송구요리스라.
It says, first of all, I should make an effort to meditate upon the equality between self and others. I should protect all as I do myself because of equal happiness and suffering. Here it provides the reason for meditating on the equality of self with others.
데르당한즈 뒤따도 비기 따지 잔주샘세니 로 아니 따지 안 사말로가 예미셔데 고야기 아니 샘름부치기 자와디 아니 다진 냠바 삼비기 아니 로텔이야 다 두고요레스로 다디 게셰슈 로레야 테슈로 베나다 제단다 만주다 아니 잔주샘 곰주가 지 비기게 맹아 망부요레 아니 균데 맹아 돈로 소바 아니 다진 냠지스 다 맹아 망부요르데니야 두스바 아니 지 가서다 지 코데부 아니 균세 피기 리bat 이나야 아니 nguyu gratre yoyo ngin konjo dindra samgu duzra daji nyam sedi daji nyam ba imbi toni ani ninji gomdang rambadi pe masiba teni yagbu shu songsha samgu duzra konjo sam dindra samgu dingi
We find the mind of enlightenment to be so inspiring. We consider the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, to be so precious. We call it the precious mind of enlightenment, precious bodhicitta. So the development of this inspiring state of mind depends upon seeing the equality between oneself and others. It depends upon developing impartiality with respect to self and others. And this is an important point. So there are many instructions for developing bodhicitta, such as, for example, we speak sometimes of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions for developing bodhicitta. Here, Geshe feels on a personal level when we look at this method for developing bodhicitta, in which we begin with contemplating the equality between oneself and others. It provides you with an easy and rational and something that you can directly understand how self and others are equal. And that, at least in Geshe's mind, becomes such a good basis for meditating on compassion.
저 지당한다 근데 맹아 둔거니 아니 샘기주기 담가디 오늘 잔내기다 담가 칠럽지 쇼레스로 쇼레스 더 이나야 빼나 더 텐두기 베게기 다지 아니 세리버도 순냠도 아니 다진 냠지 가서 근데 맹아 둔거니 잔주 샘검단디 지금 안주 더 드론이로 치고 쩌나 가부쇼지 콘줄로래야 태 콘줄로래야 마테바이나 더 냥가 말아왔어 가부쇼지 차고도서 니에서나 디시온디 지민지기 베게 아니 개왕하시 마시랑시지 로 레균데 마시랑시지 더 두스 사마로 간지 샘을 쇼고에 차고도서 다신 냠지 냠버시 온디 잠발라 다신 냠세디 만주지 사마로 찍바레세고 말다 메이나 지 아니 전도 찍바 미릭 찍바 딘디레스라고 말 부모이나 지 사마 부이나 부모이나 부모인 딘디라고 말았어 냠세디 대원 되바도 동감은 되바 냠바 디수 딘을 셰바이나로 수 딘을 셰바이나 무역 라트 투야기 무역 내단직 렌도스로
We have methods such as the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions for developing bodhicitta, and this method contains great blessings. But still, when you think of sharing this method with others, like, for example, if you share these methods with people that come from outside of the Buddhist tradition, like, for example, from the academy, and you want to use this method as a common basis for meditation, Geshe reckons that it's going to be hard in conveying this method to others. Because you need to then think of past and future lifetimes and karma, actions and the results. And you also need to make sure that you can get your head around it. So if you work with others outside of the Buddhist tradition, the academy and so forth, Geshe feels that it'd be hard to then use the sevenfold cause and effect personal practice as a common way of meditation. But then if you look at the other system, which begins with equalizing self with others, where you recognize the equality between yourself and others, it's not that you think of all others as being exactly the same or exactly equal in terms of, for example, their gender or their physical attributes and so forth. It's not that all of a sudden everyone become the same in that boys become girls and girls become boys. It's not like that. It's rather that when we meditate on the sameness of self and others, we meditate on the sameness of everyone in terms of seeking happiness and wanting to avoid suffering.
데레다 디자 nganzu di tolya ra dakshin nyambati dadan shendu nyamban tambu nindu bebdi gomsati tambu nini ra tambu nini pigila ya chi chagin shen khang mogo ba nyambares pigila ya nganzu dinlan rodeng bu chongma de sozu nibodi ani deva dongmo de nyambaradas kazn ko gyug de yo karche de gyugores deva jikche de gyugores dunga mandeni 다 대위치도 주어디 동안 되면 봐디 뒤땡 거스 진짜 냠바 레스 라운디 야차 야탐바 비 무역이 아니 균센시에지 진짜 담분이는 비기 냠바이 뭐 공바이나 냠나 대번 대버단 동안 문대버 징종인바이나 아니 소수기 대비체도 아니 셴라야 동하트야디 장부 참아서스로 잔된 참아서스 된자 잔된 마이나 아니 좀된 되게 진주 참아서스로 어두 상지 담바이나 다시 냠지 로공야디 빼마스바테니 이왕 쳐버지 간지 잔주심 기여자로 매자로 다시 냠지 로공바디 오늘 잔 잠블링 난기 미 잔된지기 에 잔된은 중인기 미 상로 야시자다 말해도 왔어.
Verse 90 provides the reasons for meditating upon the equality between self and others because of equal happiness and suffering. So when you recognize the equality in terms of happiness and suffering of all living beings, self and others, you come to see that everyone, including, for example, a small insect, you might see an ant rushing about, running here and there in front of you. And then you start thinking about it. Why does it behave in this way? It goes all over the place, running all over the place, because also, just like me, it has that basic wish to be happy or to be well and not to have suffering. And for that reason, it behaves in such a way, just like me, wanting to be happy and wanting to avoid suffering. So in this way, we first of all recognize our equality in terms of seeking happiness, well-being, wanting to avoid suffering and pain. And if we are equal or the same in that sense, harming others for the sake of getting my own happiness is dishonest. If I cause others pain in order to become happy myself, how would that be an honest attitude? So that if you think about the equality of oneself with others, and you think that if I behave in a way that is harmful to others in order to be happy, I'm not going to be an honest person, and therefore I'm not going to be a genuine or a true follower of the Buddha. It gives you another perspective. So then when you recognize the equality of self and others and use that in order to become an honest person, you can definitely 100% certain that you can develop and see the equality between oneself and others.
제가 탑 관계권에 공시나 다단신도 냠반니 당분인도 베베데 공부를 차오 제다르시나 나기 대와 체도 줍지 동ар 체도 고보신도 젠기 데둘라야 돌렌 테더 체비 젠기 데워드바도 동ar 세와 냠베나 심전 탐제 다시 제버 손이 소머 차오스
Looking at the commentary to verse 90, it says, begin with a query. With which method should one meditate? The answer is, at first, strive in meditating on equalizing self and others. How to do it? Since others have the same acceptance and rejection of happiness and suffering as oneself, and try to establish the happiness and clear the suffering. In the same way as one tries to establish one's happiness and stop one's suffering, one should look after all sentient beings, cherishing them like oneself. Thank you. We will leave it here for now. Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sangye Drugyune Drowa Chikyama Lupa De Salango Parasho Chanchu Sancho
Rinpoche Maje Banam Jigyurchi Kewa Nyamba Mebaya Kone Gondu Pewarasho
Kangri Rawe
Kole Shinkansu Pendan Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Shenre Sewan Tenzen Gyatso Ye Shape Sinte Bardu Tengyuruchi
Tu Tu
Chanjin Jangun Gyawe Tenzin Kyombe Konso Lopo Chosun Kowe Le Mondu Gyu Pada So Du Jin Kondu Shabden Sho Thank you.